and the omnibus. So I was forced into the Archers when I was a child. And look, it's come back to bite me later on. I'm awash with this stuff.
The Archers is the world's longest-running radio show, with more than 15,000 episodes broadcast. Despite being a rural flavour show, The Archers is recorded in the heart of...
Welcome to The Debate. Today we're wading right into what feels like a total minefield in Ambridge. We're looking at the events of Friday, January 16th, and, well, the village is frankly coming apart at the seams. You have a young man, George, who is traumatized, volatile, arguably dangerous, and a community that is just tying itself in knots trying to protect him. So the central question for us today is a messy one. Does protecting a vulnerable family member require you to lie to the law?
Or does that exact kind of protection that, lying for love, actually end up destroying the person you're trying to save?
It's this huge question.
It is, and it forces a choice between compassion and, reality. Because we're seeing the return of Uncle Clive, a man who I would argue is basically a predator in a fisherman's vest. And at the exact same time, we're seeing Kenton Archer make a decision that I think it might be the worst mistake of his life. We're watching the dismantling of truth in real time.
I see the board set a little differently. I see it as a triage situation. You have a bleeding wound, George, and you have a very blunt instrument, the legal system. The tension is whether Kenton was right to deceive a probation officer to keep George out of prison. I'll be arguing that under these, extreme circumstances, social cushioning, and yes, even deception, is a necessary moral duty. It's a shield.
And I'm going to argue that Kenton didn't build a shield. He dug a trap. By lying to authority, Kenton hasn't protected George. He has validated the toxic, cynical worldview of Uncle Clive that the world is full of liars and the only way to survive is to game the system. True safety requires rigorous accountability.
Okay, so let's ground this in the reality of the village, because I think it's easy to judge from a distance. We have to talk about the atmosphere in Ambridge. It isn't normal. The whole village is operating in a state of high cortisol panic.
You mean the paranoia?
I mean the sandwich. We have to talk about the beef and mustard sandwich.
Right. Susan Carter.
Exactly. And this detail is crucial to understanding why Kenton does what he does. You have Susan Carter, who's usually a sensible woman, just absolutely spiraling. She sees a stranger in the village shop buying a beef and mustard sandwich, and her brain immediately jumps to hitman. She thinks he's one of the attackers coming back to finish the job. She even says, "I've started to worry that any stranger in the village is one of Marky's mates."
It is heartbreaking, actually. It shows you just how deep the trauma has cut.
It is. But it also shows that the community is not thinking clearly. They're traumatized. George himself admits to Reeds later that he's terrified at the thought of not knowing who wanted me dead. So when you have a mother who's terrified of a sandwich customer and a victim who's terrified of his own shadow, you can't expect that family to calmly cooperate with a probation review. They're in survival mode. They are huddled in the cave, keeping the wolves out.
I agree. They're panicked. Of course they are. But that panic is exactly why you need an objective third party. You don't let the panicked family run the asylum. And that brings us to the core conflict, the pub scene. The whole interaction between Kenton and Reg Turnick.
Right. Let's look at that moment. Reg Turnick, the probation officer, walks into the Bull. He's investigating a complaint about George's behavior on New Year's Eve. And there's Kenton. He's not a lawyer. He's a publican. He's just standing there wiping glasses. And suddenly George's entire future is in his hands. He has about 2 seconds to decide. Do I tell the cold, hard truth and potentially send this traumatized kid back to prison? Or do I soften the edges?
Soften the edges is a very generous euphemism for lying to a court official.
It's a characterization. He calls the incident high spirits. He calls it a misunderstanding. He is interpreting the spirit of the law versus the letter. He asks Reg, what pub doesn't sometimes quietly suggest a punter go home? He's trying to normalize George's behavior to stop him from being pathologized by the system. If he tells the literal truth that George was aggressive, George potentially goes back to prison. Is that a proportional response for a drunken outburst by a victim of attempted murder? Kenton sees the ordinary person behind the offender. That's an act of profound charity.
I see it as an act of profound arrogance, and I want to drill down into the mechanics of this, because the detail here is everything. Reg asks a specific, factual question. Was he escorted off the premises? That's a yes or a no. Kenton says, that's a harsh way of putting it, and then spins this story about a quiet word. He is gaslighting the probation officer.
Affirming implies malice. Kenton is protecting.
Gaslighting implies making someone question their own reality. Reed has a report saying George was kicked out. Kenton essentially tells him, no, you're imagining the severity. And here's the tragedy you're ignoring. Reed Turnick is good at his job. He says it explicitly, I am not here to punish. He is the safety rail.
Is he, though?
Yes. I mean, his whole job is to stop drink leading to offending behavior. He is the one person who is actually equipped to stop George's drinking from turning into violence. And when Kenton lies, he removes that safety rail. He tells Reed everything is fine when everything is actually on fire.
But let's look at Regis' position. He admits in that scene he's rushed, he has a busy day, he's a bureaucrat with a caseload. You call him a safety rail, I call him a tripwire. If Kenton admits George was aggressive, Reed doesn't have time for a deep psychoanalysis session. He has to tick a box. Violation of terms, boom, recall.
You're projecting incompetence onto Reed to justify Kenton's dishonesty. Reed actually shows incredible nuance. He did his digging. He tells George later, from doing a bit of digging, it seems the complainant might have exaggerated the incident. Now think about what that means. Reed came to that conclusion because of Kenton's lie. He trusts Kenton. He operates on good faith. Kenton violated that, so now the file is closed. The pattern of aggression, George losing his temper, getting ejected, is officially hidden.
And George stays free. He stays in the village where he can heal.
But does he heal, or does he just learn that he's untouchable? Because look at the immediate consequence. Reg leaves thinking there's no problem. George thinks he got away with it. The only person who knows the full truth is Kenton. And Kenton is not a therapist. He's an uncle who's terrified of rocking the boat. You say he bought George time, I say he bought George a false sense of security that is going to blow up in his face.
I think blow up is dramatic. Kenton says we owe George. This is about the community paying a debt. But I want to pivot because your argument about safety assumes the only threat to George is the legal system. And we know there is another player on the board now.
Uncle Clive.
Uncle Clive. And I think you're conflating Kenton's protective instinct with Clive's destructive one. I'll grant you, Clive is abrasive. He's chaotic. But looking strictly at the text, does he not have a bit of a point?
Oh, be careful here.
No, hear me out. Clive tells George, true peace comes from doing your own thing your way. He points out that the apologies George got from people like Chris Carter or Brian Aldridge might have been, performative. When Clive asks, do you think they would apologize to you? He's forcing George to question the power dynamics in the village. Isn't there some value in George having an advocate who is solely on his side, separate from the village hierarchy?
If Clive were genuinely on George's side, I might agree. But the evidence suggests Clive is predatory, not protective. Let's really look at that fishing trip scene.
Introducing the Archer's Mug, where elegance meets everyday comfort. Crafted from premium white ceramic, designed with vibrant peekaboo colors inside, simple, modern, and stylish. Start your day the Archer's way, with warmth, familiarity, and the comfort of voices you've come to love. As the stories unfold on the Archers, let this mug become part of your daily ritual, a small reminder of life in Ambridge. Practical for every home, dishwasher and microwave safe. Available in 2 sizes, 11 ounces and 15 ounces, designed to fit your lifestyle. Enjoy your favorite drink in a mug that connects you to Britain's most beloved countryside story, The Archers. For more information and to order your very own The Archers mug, follow the link below and make it part of your daily routine.
That wasn't just a bonding exercise, it was a masterclass in isolation.
He took the boy fishing. It's a classic uncle move.
He took the boy away from his support network and then systematically dismantled his trust in them. Look at the phone call. Susan calls to check on him. Now remember the sandwich? Susan is terrified.
Her calling is a perfectly normal, loving reaction. How does Clive frame it? Does he say, "Your mom loves you"? No, he says, "She's checking up on you." It's toxic control. He reframes love as oppression.
But George feels oppressed. That's the key. Susan is stifling him. Her fear is suffocating him. Clive is the only one acknowledging that George feels like he can't breathe. When he says people will drive you crazy, he's validating George's frustration. That's why George listens.
He validates the frustration only to weaponize it. That's how grooming works. You identify a grievance, you validate it, and then you redirect it against the person's family. Clive tells George to lie to his Nana. Don't tell her we're fishing. He is actively training George to keep secrets from his primary caregivers. And then he says, if you can't tell your Nana that, it says a lot about the kind of person she is. That is malicious. He is driving a wedge.
I think malicious might be too strong. Clive's acidic, he thinks the world is harsh, and he's trying to toughen George up.
Oh, I strongly disagree. There's a moment that reveals exactly who Clive is, and it has nothing to do with toughening anyone up. It's the comment about Amber.
Ah, the girlfriend.
Yes, that was repulsive.
It was uncomfortable, I'll grant you that.
Uncomfortable? It was revealing. Clive asks about George's girlfriend. He calls her a stunner. Then he makes a comment about her legs. If I was a few years younger. George is visibly uncomfortable. He tries to change the subject right away. This proves Clive's interest is not in George's well-being. He sees George's life, his girlfriend, his vulnerability as resources to be consumed. He is utterly self-serving. He doesn't see Amber as a person. He sees her as an object.
That is a fair point. Clive's moral compass is definitely broken.
Broken? It's non-existent. And this is why I am so hard on Kenton. You cannot separate these two plot lines. Kenton's lie creates the environment where Clive thrives.
How so?
Because Clive's main argument to George is, the village is full of hypocrites and liars. He says, believe me, this village is full of fakes. And then, barely an hour later, what does George see? He sees Kenton, a pillar of the community, lying to a probation officer.
I see where you're going with this.
It's the synthesis of the tragedy. Clive uses a kernel of truth, that people sometimes lie, to sell a mountain of toxic philosophy. And when Kenton lies, he proves Clive right. George is standing there thinking, Uncle Clive said everyone's a fake, and look, even Kenton is faking it. The cognitive dissonance resolves in Clive's favor. Kenton has inadvertently handed Clive a moral victory.
That is a compelling, if depressing, synthesis. George is caught between two distortions of reality. Kenton's distortion is, everything is fine, it was just high spirits. And Clive's distortion is, everyone is out to get you, trust only yourself.
Exactly. And the tragedy is that the actual truth, which is George is struggling, he was aggressive, and he needs professional help, gets completely lost.
Well, I would frame it a bit differently. I think George is caught between two forms of protection. Kenton is offering a shield, Clive is offering a sword. Kenton wants to shield George from the consequences while he heals. Clive wants to arm George against the world he sees as hostile. The danger isn't just that Kenton lied, the danger is that George might pick up the sword because he feels the shield isn't enough.
But look at the result. The proof is in the pudding. The episode ends with George deceiving Susan. He lies about being with Clive. He tells her he's just walking when he's fishing. He's adopting Clive's methodology. The shield Kenton offered has just taught George that hiding the truth is an acceptable strategy. If Kenton had been honest, if he'd said, yes, George had a bad night, we're worried, help us, it would have signaled to George that we face our problems. Instead, the signal is, we hide our problems, and a boy who hides his problems is prime real estate for an uncle who teaches that never explain, never apologize is a virtue.
I'm just not convinced that honesty would have yielded the benevolent outcome you imagine. You have a lot of faith in the system's capacity for mercy. Reg Turnick isn't a villain, but he is a functionary. If he recalls George, George goes to prison. In prison, he's surrounded by actual criminals, not just a cynical uncle. He's cut off from his family. He's brutalized. Kenton's lie prevents that. It buys time.
It buys time on a ticking bomb.
Maybe. But sometimes you have to hold the bomb and hope you can defuse it before it goes off. That's what family does. They take the risk, and Kenton is taking that risk onto himself. Jolene realizes it. She says, lying to a probation officer, what were you thinking? She knows Kenton has exposed himself to legal jeopardy to save George. That is a form of love. It's messy, it's probably illegal, but it's love.
And the road to hell is paved with intentions born of love. You say he's holding the bomb. I say he's hidden the bomb in the basement and told everyone it's a vase. And meanwhile, Clive is downstairs lighting matches.
That is a terrifying image. But to bring it back to this hidden threat idea, you mentioned Clive weaponizing the paranoia.
Yes, Clive tells George the attack on you was by an amateur, someone you know.
This is critical. Clive is explicitly planting the seed that the danger is internal to the village. By doing this, he isn't just alleviating George's fear. He's redirecting it. He wants George to trust no one but Uncle Clive.
Right. And that is why Kenton's closing ranks strategy is so fatal. When the family closes ranks, they create opacity, secrets, whispers. That is the exact environment where paranoia grows. If everyone was open, yes, there was an attack, yes, we are worried, yes, George is struggling, Clive's conspiracy theories wouldn't take root. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Kenton has turned off the lights, and now the mold is growing.
But again, sunlight can burn. If they turn on the lights, the police come in, the probation service comes in, the media. The village is already fragile. I maintain that Kenton's instinct was correct, even if the execution was flawed. He is trying to keep the family unit intact as the primary source of support. He believes that he and Susan can handle George better than the state can.
And that is the hubris of the amateur. We can handle it. They couldn't handle him on New Year's Eve. He got kicked out of their own pub. They aren't handling it. They are enduring it. And by lying to the one professional who could help, they are ensuring that when the crash comes, it will be catastrophic.
We're nearing the end of our time, and we haven't even really touched on Jolene's role. She seems to be the only one with a foot in both camps, wanting to protect George, but being appalled by the lie.
Jolene is the audience surrogate here. She represents the sanity that's slowly leaving the building. She asks the question we all want to ask. What were you thinking? But notice, even she doesn't run to Reg and correct the record. She's complicit now too. The lie has implicated her.
It's that web of small deceits. It catches everyone.
And that's my closing argument. This isn't about one lie. It's about a culture of deception being built brick by brick to supposedly protect George. But a fortress built on lies isn't a fortress, it's a prison. And George is trapped inside it with the one person who knows how to manipulate him best, Uncle Clive.
So that brings us to our conclusion. We're looking at a community under immense pressure, making impossible choices. My position remains that Kenton Archer did what he felt was necessary to preserve George's freedom. In a world where the legal system is a blunt instrument, the family has to act as the shock absorber. Kenton's lie was a buffer. It was imperfect, it was risky, but it was an attempt to keep George in the light of the community, not the darkness of a cell.
And my position remains that this shock absorber has masked a critical mechanical failure. By lying to Reg, Kenton confirmed Clive's accusation that the village is corrupt. He has, completely inadvertently, handed Clive a moral victory. We end the episode with George keeping secrets from Susan and his aggression hidden from his probation officer. The protection offered today has created a blind spot that I fear will be the cause of a downfall tomorrow. George is now listening to a man who tells him accountability is weakness, and thanks to Kenton, he has no example of rigorous honesty to counter it.
It's a precarious situation. You have the soft protection of the family versus the hard reality of the law, and this chaotic element of Uncle Clive weaving between them, just looking for an opening. For joining us on the debate.
Until next time.
So, what are you doing now?
Just getting ready for the next episode. Just
And,
moving mics around.
So, what do you do?
I do the spot effects on the archers. Any
Are you what we
movements
call Foley then?
and- kind of. Yep.
Okay. And these are all part of the paraphernalia of production.
Yep. That's the ball bar. That's.
This one.
Yep. That's.
Haley so wanted to be in their own place when their baby came. It's due in 2 months. Not much chance of that now. No. I mean, it would have been a stretch for them financially, mind, but Oh, I just wish there was something practical I could do to help them, Caroline. I mean,
I think The Archers has had this immense popularity over the years, basically because it has always very accurately reflected the reality of life and living in a rural community at whatever